So we are thrilled to not only have all three of these films in our festival, but we are truly pleased and grateful to have the three filmmakers with us today on the Q&A. So I'm going to start right in. It's my pleasure to introduce the filmmakers for our Centerpiece program. So we have Gavin Arukhan, the director and writer, producer, and animator of Pakala Kids. He studied animation at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and graduated with a BA in creative media. As a Filipino Japanese American raised in Waipahu, Hawaii, Gavin strives to tell impactful cultural stories through animation. Gavin has directed 3 animated short films, Down the Red Dirt Road, The Girl and the Kappa Monster, and the highly ambitious horror comedy short Midnight Showing. And these films collectively have won numerous nominations and awards. Hi, Gavin. Welcome.
Hi, Susan.
And the next filmmaker we have is Kalilinoe Detwiler. Kalilinoe is the director, writer, producer, animator, and part of the cast of Where Smoke Rises. She is also, by the way, part of the cast for Pakala Kids, which is pretty cool. So she is an MA student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa with a focus on cultural studies. She's the writer and director of Pua Ka'uahi, which received an Academy of Creative Media Production Award. She is currently working as a storyboard artist and animator on the short film Kapo Mailele, and as a mentor with the Olino Arts Summer Animation Program. She began the Manoa Creative Productions Club at UH Manoa for student animators and will be finishing her 2nd semester as president. Welcome, Kalilinoe. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Finally, but not least, we have Anthony Banua-Simon. Anthony is a documentary filmmaker and editor. His films have screened at venues such as the Brooklyn Museum and MoMA PS1, as well as the website Mubi, Filmmaker Magazine, and Hyperallergic. In 2014, his short about the workers of the Domino Sugar Factory in Brooklyn, New York, Third Shift, won Best Documentary at the Brooklyn Film Festival. Anthony attended the Evergreen State College and was a fellow at the Union Docs Collaborative Studio Program. He's currently a member of the volunteer-run Spectacle Theater in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start out with a question for Gavin and Kalilinoe. Let's talk about your films a little bit. I wanted to start out asking you to tell us what inspired you to tell this particular story. And also in that question, who did you make this film for? So when you were making this film, who were you thinking was the intended or targeted audience for your film? So do either of you want to start, or?
I can start.
Great,
yeah.
Thanks.
So the Pakala Kids is like really inspired by a lot of my childhood, because my family grew up in Pakala camp. I believe my great grandparents were farmers there, but I spent a lot of my summers there as a kid, and it would just be this really great place to like explore, and just I would go running around with my cousins and get into trouble in certain places. But I really wanted to capture that feeling in animation. And Pakala Kids kind of started off as another short film I did when I first started animating. It's called Down the Red Dirt Road, but it like covers some themes of like leaving home or losing loved ones, and I'd say a lot of those themes come up again in Pakala Kids, which I made a few years after. uh, and a lot of that is inspired by like when my like I've never actually moved house like where I live on Oahu. So, but at Pakala, when my great grandmother passed away, my the family who lived there had to move out of that house, and I really was attached to that house. So that I guess is my only real like experience of having to lose a place, and um, that was kind of sad for me too. And also um, on a more recent level, like I was making Pakala Kids as um, a senior in university, and I wanted to go into the animation industry. And I know for that, like typically you move away to California. So I was also like making the film to kind of process the feelings of like moving home, moving away from home and into a completely new environment, which Lonnie at the end of my film does have to come to terms with.
And who were you intending the audience to be when you made the film?
I kind of when I get asked this question kind of a lot, and my immediate response is kind of like I'm just making movies for me. Like,
That's fair.
but also like I know a lot of people are out there are like me, and like they'd love to see their experiences in film or in animation. Especially animation doesn't, at least in the mainstream, doesn't spotlight more marginalized communities. But also like I do hope people who aren't like me, who don't have my experience, watch this film and can still get a lot out of it and really like have a new worldview, I'd say, or a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. It does have that very sweet feel to it, the small kid time just playing around outside. It's very sweet. And then yeah, and then and then to see the moving truck at the end, and you see the girls' faces, it's very moving. So that's it was a nice juxtaposition there of all of that. Yeah, thanks. So Kalilinoe, how about you?
Hi. So Puaka'uahi was, I guess the main reason I was interested in making that film was because I'm heavily invested in mo'olelo, especially the folklore aspect, because that's how I felt I started to connect more with my Kanaka identity. So the actual production of the film was where it became my and my crew's story. I guess it was me trying to practice what my kuleana was and what it looked like at each stage of the film production process. So it comes from a more pseudo traditional contemporary perspective. And that was me figuring out and acknowledging that I wasn't in a place of knowing or ability to tell that the traditional mo'olelo of Pele and Kamapua'a, which we hear a lot about. So instead, I was inspired to tell a story that was inspired by it, an adaptation. And it was mainly a way for me to investigate my values behind the screen and explore what animation can do for Hawaii. In terms of who it was intended for, I finished the film for the Kanaka community, mainly because I wanted them to be able to hear Olelo on screen and to have something to watch with their kids and to practice Olelo. But it was also for people like me who want to see these visuals and be able to recognize, like, I know that waterfall or that beach, or I know why, or I know like this person behind the waterfall, Hina, and know why she asks Pele for help drawing her kapa. Because there's like a joy in connecting and being able to realize that there's mo'olelo behind this story. And I think that's just part of, I want everyone to feel included who was knowledgeable about it.
I love that about your film, that it was in Hawaiian, Olelo Hawaii. And because I think a lot of people don't know that it's a language that is alive and thriving, or they have never heard it, and it's very beautiful. So it was really nice to have that in your film. I was wondering if you would feel comfortable um, talking a little bit about the characters for the audience who may not be familiar with all the characters in your film.
Yeah, definitely. So, so the main two characters are Pele and Kamapua'a, and I was mainly inspired by this one thesis written by Lily Kala Dorton of the Kamapua'a epic. And so Pele is this volcano goddess. She resides in Kilauea on Hawaii Island, and she has like this tense relationship with Kamapua'a of both love and it's a very large story. I don't think I can explain it very well on the spot, but so there's other characters as well. She has her sister, the Hi'iakas. She has this other tension with Poliahu, who resides on Mauna Kea, who we see halfway through the film. Hina is the one behind the waterfall, and she comes from the Maui tales. So that Mo'olelo is basically, she is beating Kappa, but the sun's too fast, so Maui slows down the sun for her. And it's basically taking these characters and putting it in a showcase of Hawaii. So it doesn't go into depth with the traditional mo'olelos, but
yeah, great. Thanks for telling us about that. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go on and ask Anthony a few questions, and then hopefully after we can have all of us a conversation about a lot of the themes that are explored in Cane Fire. Okay, so Anthony, I will say that your film captures the attention of people just looking through our program. I think the black and white image of the film up there, catches their eye, and then Kauai, just hearing that it's a film about Kauai. Everyone's kind of into Kauai right now. It's like so my family is from Kauai. My 4 grandparents immigrated there, and it's always been this sleepy island, and there's nothing to do there. And it's just within the past 5 or 10 years, all of a sudden it's the island of choice for tourists, and you see it in the traffic there now, and just the way things are changing. But it still surprises me when people say they're going to Hawaii and they say that they're going to Kauai. It's like, why are you going there? Yeah. So I think when people see that, they're really interested in your film, because everybody's interested in the island right now. Mm-hmm. And so your film is this immersive 90-minute energized mashup of your personal history, Hollywood film clips, interviews of locals and activists, Kanaka activists, and showing the economic and cultural forces, like you say, that have cast the indigenous and working class people of the island as extras in their own story. I think that is well said that way. So tell us a little bit about the seed of this film, or the impetus for you making it.
Sure, yeah. It actually started as an idea of a film back when I was in a documentary residency in Brooklyn, New York, and I was making a short documentary about the Domino Sugar refinery in Brooklyn, and looking at the industrial history of this one neighborhood in Brooklyn where everyone was in the surrounding neighborhood was working at the sugar factory, and that was the labor force in that area. And it actually closed down in 2004. And I was doing research about just sugar history, of production, and I knew that my family was involved, but I didn't know to what extent, or even how overreaching the the sugar trade was, because the sugar that was being extracted from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, brought into this sugar refinery in Brooklyn, was actually connected to my great-great-grandmother, who worked in these in the sugar fields in Puerto Rico, and actually traveled from Puerto Rico to Hawaii. And that's kind of part of my family story. And so, yeah, I started this project and interviewed these two former workers of the Domino Sugar Factory, who talked about their time there and being involved in, there was a very strong union with the Domino Sugar Factory, and them being very like empowered by that, and you know, as something that was very significant. And it was also, it was kind of a microcosm of what was happening in Kauai, because this area that was this industrial neighborhood is Williamsburg now today, which immediately transferred from industrial buildings to luxury condominiums in a very short amount of time. And so I was seeing a lot of parallels in what was happening in Kauai. And so I just started traveling and spending like more time getting stories from my great uncle Henry about his time. And he was able to talk about so many different chapters and like these economic stages in Kauai, the sugar and pineapple era to tourism, now to just broader service economy and this kind of luxury real estate investments stage. And it kind of branched out from there. I was doing a lot of research, historical research, and then kind of talking with people and getting these kind of oral histories, and just slowly kind of forming the film from there. That was themes that I knew I wanted to talk about, but I just was being patient with kind of letting it develop. And it started with, you know, I look at the Cocoa Palms Hotel, and I knew the history of it as, you know, a sacred place for Native Hawaiians, but it wasn't until much later in the filming that the sovereignty activists were actually restoring the land, and that became a part of the film that was not even intended, but became part of the story because it was so relevant, and it all came together. But it was something that was not planned. So it was really just kind of a journey, right? Just following the journey and keeping these threads and ideas in mind, and how everything was in conversation with each other.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, since you mentioned it about the activists, have you followed that lately? I haven't heard whatever, because so I'm on Kauai now, and the Cocoa Palms looks more like a wreck than it's ever looked, and it doesn't look like anything's happening there. So I was wondering how, if they have any plans to.
Well, what happened shortly after we finished the film was actually the development company that was going to make it a hotel in the spirit of, you know, this retro Cocoa Palms era. Actually, I don't know what the exact business lingo, defaulted on their basically the whole thing fell apart. And so it's back to square one. And it was really unfortunate because the activists that were maintaining the land were growing taro. They were able to live on this property. You know, once they got removed, everything started, you know, they had to start from scratch. And it was really a shame because now nothing is happening. There's nothing going on in the property. So it was really sad to watch that.
How long were they there for?
You know, people came at different stages, but I think overall, at least a good couple years. It's about 2 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you couldn't see that going by on the highway. I mean, I think they talked about it in the film. You can't you couldn't see that happening back there.
Yeah, I think one thing to emphasize too that might not be clear in the film is that they were very welcoming to people that were houseless, that, you know, as long as they followed the schedule of like, this is how we're going to take care of this space, they were very welcoming. It didn't, and, you know, if you showed an interest to the culture and you want to be, then you were welcome. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't exclusive to a certain group.
Yeah. I just love, I mean, for one, it's like this incredible feat to pull all these different threads that you have going. You know, your mind must have just been like this jumble of threads, and how did you pull that together and make it into this coherent film? You know, all the Hollywood clips and all of that. Pretty amazing.
I think I think a big part of even coming to that and resolving the clutter was my producer on the project. We actually met when we were doing the project about the Domino Sugar Factory, and he was not familiar with Hawaii or Hawaii's history, but we had similar tastes and similar politics. And so when I would film and I would show him what I filmed, it was kind of like he was the first audience member that I had to kind of make sense of this logic for him. Like, he was just like pretty much an essential force of like what is staying on track of these themes that we want to explore. And otherwise I could not have done it.
Yeah.
I would have gotten lost in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have someone like that
Yeah.
on your side. Yeah. I don't think you've told this audience about your connection to your family there, and like how you had all these films in your head for a very long time. Because, yeah, can you tell that story?
Yeah, part of I guess an earlier seed of the film, before doing it in a practical way, was just the childhood experience of visiting my family on Kauai, and growing up on the mainland and having this perspective, you know, this perspective of all these Hollywood films that were shot there, and thinking that it would have some relevancy to them, or it would create some sort of connection. And I didn't, you know, I didn't know how else to. That was my best attempt of and you know, it wasn't relevant to them, and it was, I think, the strange experience of like having this outsider view of the island, but then being welcomed by the family and having these experiences that are totally not even connected to these films. And I think when I did this film, I wanted to interrogate like, what was the appeal of these blockbusters, and how can I use them as a source to talk about things in parallel, or dissect why these films were made in the first place. Like, what was the ideology that was driving them? I think that was the starting point, and then branching out from there.
Yeah, I really liked it was really a skillful way that you use these clips, you know, and you don't have to actually say it, just putting these clips in the specific way that you do it. You're speaking to colonialism, racism, exploitation of the land and of the people. It just was a very skillful way that you did it. What were you? How did you pull that together? You know,
Mm-hmm.
how, you know, telling all those parts of what Kauai is now.
I think that I had all these threads. I knew, like, just for the Hollywood clips, I kind of had this parallel, I guess, timeline of how to organize the footage, how to look at these films as, are they looking at Hawaii as a fantasy? Are they commenting on a particular historical moment? breaking them up by like subject or just backdrop. And then they would it would be this strain that would be in parallel with what I was researching as the material history. And I was first drawn to my great uncle's stories. So we're looking at the pineapple and sugar era and the union activism and all that was another thread. And then the much harder, more difficult for me to, but important thing was looking at, the Native Hawaiian perspective as like being really challenged by, non-Western ideas of land ownership or land maintenance. I had so much pride about what my great-grandfather had done in the Union, but it was still working within this kind of idea of land ownership in the idea of, in a capitalist sense or like a state or around statehood. And so looking at a different relationship to the land and really listening and respecting that point of view and that how that they can both be in conversation was another part that was also another thread that I would make sure that they were both in conversation throughout.
Yeah. The other thing, well, first I wanted to just throw out to our audience to feel free to throw in your questions to the chat. We can address them as we go along. But Anthony, the other part that is so moving about your film is your personal family connection and seeing your family in the film. And I'm just wondering, also you have this unique perspective because you have an attachment to Kauai. It's where your family lives, where your family's from, but yet you're an outsider because you grew up on the mainland. So I think that's a really unique perspective to be able to see it from further back maybe than people who are living in it. And I'm wondering if they've seen your film and what they think of your film. Do they see it in the same way, I guess, that you saw it?
Yeah, they've been receptive to it. And I guess I was a little nervous about my Auntie Sandy because I wanted to show her relationship to the island in a really honest way that I think a lot of people could connect to. And I wanted her to feel that way. I didn't want to make her feel that she was, compromised or something where, she has this connection to her Native Hawaiian heritage and she's practicing the hula, she's learning Olelo, but also there's like the material reality of she has to pay rent in this scenario of where she's at. So it's like, so to explain it, well, in the film that, she's working at a hotel. And, I think that I didn't know, like, it could have gone either way. She could have, not wanted to be seen, people want to be seen in a certain way, or she wanted to be seen in a certain way, but she was really, thought it was really honest and appreciated that. And I think a lot of people, it wasn't a judgment and it's just a fact of what we have to, what we have to do, what's the factors available to her. My cousin Dylan, who you see as working at Kukiula, he appreciated it. He actually doesn't work there anymore, so I think he's more disconnected from it. But I think that when I talk to them, we're kind of talking about possibilities of stories that they're excited about, that, in my documentary, it's like a critique of Hollywood, but for them, it's more possibilities of just making new films. And that's what's so great about with Gavin and Kalilinoe, like your animations, like it's a whole new, language. It's creating new stories, new folklore, and I think that's what they like to talk about the most.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's great. I have to say, when I saw the film and the end, kind of near the end when everything's kind of the monsters are coming out and eating the tourists and the guys dropping bombs. I mean, I at first thought you made that yourself, and I guess I didn't realize that they were actually from films. I hadn't seen those films, but so I mean, it was even more skillful that you just like put this whole thing together. And I don't know about you, Gavin and Kalilinoe, but when I saw that, it was felt kind of cathartic, like yes, like you just kind of want to like crush it all, like because it's all so heartbreaking to see, and seeing the land kind of disrespected and taken. I just appreciated that last part. What was that like to put that? Was that your intention, I guess, or?
Yeah, I think when I was looking for this lost film that has this climax of this cane fire that was so threatening to the movie production at the time and the sugar company, that they thought it would cause this insurrection of labor. And, no one has seen the film since the 60s. So you don't really know. So I just had in my mind, like, what would be the best kind of the ultimate revenge that would be their worst nightmare, the company. And so it was, we're looking at all these films, misusing the island. It's like, if you could rework it to be in favor of this feeling of possibility and just this release, it's just this, so much is built up in the film. It's just this cathartic moment that it's a fantasy, but it's like, I think it's, just one of the ways that you can use film. And a lot of it comes from B movies, because that's the logic of B movies, is they're the most intense expressions of different ideas, and just having that moment, was something that I had planned.
Yeah, that's great. So I'd like all of us now to talk a little bit about, so since you've made the movie, when did you were filming it or shooting it, like in what, between 2016 to 18, or how?
Actually as early as 2014.
14.
Yeah.
And so since then we've had a pandemic, and having been living here through the pandemic, it just feels more so than even your film has shown. The amount of local people who are needing to move off the island because they can't afford to live here, juxtaposed with the amount of people moving in from the mainland, and buying expensive properties and houses without ever seeing them. They just want to come here because for right now it's a safe place to be in a pandemic. They want to live in paradise. They can afford whatever, so they're coming. And it's a little heartbreaking. It's a lot heartbreaking to see local people not be able to raise a family and stay here. And Gavin, I was noting in your film how you show that moving van at the end, and I was thinking, is he talking about this, where all the local people having to move away because they can't afford to live here? Yeah, it's just, and also recently, it just came out, the statistics that the median income of a home on Kauai is $1 million. And that's like way higher than any person, that most people living here can afford.
Right.
So yeah. Um, so Kalilinoe and Gavin, do you have any comments on, like, do you see that happening on Oahu too? People having to move away because of the cost of living here and houses being really expensive. They are. I mean, I know they are on Oahu.
Yeah. So the ending of Pakala Kids, yeah, that is true. Like I did with that film, I almost kind of see it as like it's such a perfect like it's so perfect that it comes before Cane Fire because throughout that film I do try to work in just or hint at like some social issues or social issues that these kids might have to deal with just like unfortunately just because of who they are. And yeah, that is something I've been noticing, especially on Oahu, is the houselessness problem um, and people having to move away. I know there's like there's a lot of housing coming up that's like meant for military families and like not really for people here. And especially when it comes to like Y&I, just like you see a lot of locals being pushed more and more that way. And then you even have like Disney coming in with their big hotel kind of driving those prices up too. So it's just really upsetting. And had a few family members and friends who moved away to the mainland just because of that reason. Yeah.
Wow. How about you, Kalilinoe? What have you observed?
I've seen that too, and I have had family that have been moving away. And I think it also goes beyond just the home. I feel like I've noticed a lot of local businesses being driven out of town, out of like Kaka'ako and Ala Moana areas. But at the same time, I feel like, especially during the pandemic when we're all home, as much as for the people who could afford to stay, we've had some time to process and heal. And I feel like the land has also been breathing a little better.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the idea that a lot of people have been given some time to also learn how to sustain themselves at home and maybe conceptualize their own businesses. I've seen a lot of local businesses sprout up recently. And I feel like that also goes back to some of the visuals in Anthony's film with this idea of destruction, especially in a Hawaiian context where destruction isn't an ending. It's often like a beginning and a chance for the soil to, gain nutrients and grow something again. So there is like a lot of displacement, but there is some hope that I hope we can see.
Yeah, that's great. I see that on Kauai too, there is now more, I think it was already building, but really more increased attention towards food security and food sustainability. I mean, the reality of, like a huge percentage of the food here is shipped in. And when you start looking at a pandemic and shipping not happening so frequently, and you realize how vulnerable you are living on an island. And of course, you can grow your food on this island. It's a great place to grow. It just grows things. So it's hopefully it's going to spur more growth that way and more smaller agricultural endeavors and that distribute food to people. I've also seen the family and the aloha come out in the pandemic on the island, where everybody just pulls together and helps each other and supports each other and makes sure that the kupuna, the elders, are being taken care of. They're really good about that, really good about community building. And so that's has been also really nice to see coming out in the pandemic. So, you know, amidst the backdrop of these other things happening that Anthony's film is bringing out, there's also that happening in the local community. Yeah. So some people who've seen the film have said, like, I think there's going to be a lot of guilt when people see the film of having been tourists here, having come here, and asking how, you know, should we not come? How do you do a economy based on tourism without just taking, you know, without, you know, doing it respectfully? How can I come and visit and be respectful of the land and the people? Do you have any thoughts about that? What would you say to people who are wondering, is it okay for me to come and visit? How does that happen?
Yeah, I think that, well, looking at how tourism was marketed and continues to be, because it's marketed in a certain way, and then people keep replicating it. It's this kind of extractive relationship where, you know, people want to feel comfortable and this is their fantasy, and they don't want to feel like there's an honest exchange where they have to actually acknowledge that there's a history here, and that you know, it's to make them feel comfortable, and if they act accordingly, it's you know, it's terrible for everyone, especially with COVID, with people that are coming over and people that aren't even service workers that aren't even vaccinated yet, that have to work with tourists. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on that, but I feel like that's where it's at right now, is the exchange it isn't equal. It's to make other people that are visiting feel, molding your life, or to make them feel comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a service industry.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Kalilinoe, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I mean, there was one part of Cane Fire where they're talking about these programs for high school students and them working in the hotel industry.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's so true. But that's also where we need to start, like, changing our perspective on tourism and maybe stop filtering students into tourism. So that's one area, but also for visitors. I know that there's a lot of us who, it's not like we don't want visitors, because we want to share our culture and our stories, but there's also a respectful way to engage with each other. So at least people who I know who have visited, who have learned the history and stayed for longer than at least like a month, to see the Hawaii behind the paradise that's presented. I think that helps a lot. And I know you mentioned that there might be some guilt of watching Cane Fire, but I don't think that's a bad thing. That's just part of being reflexive about our relationship and the implications of their visit.
Gavin, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think yeah, kind of like what Kalilinoe said, I think it's a good thing that there is kind of this guilt. I think it's good to be uncomfortable, and I think that is, you should use that guilt to kind of as a way to like look within yourself and really figure out like how are you contributing to certain issues, and also channel that energy into like activism and like bringing attention to them, working, donating, just trying to make things better. I don't personally I'm not sure like what to do about tourism. I can only speak like from my experience as an animator, like that industry doesn't really exist here in Hawaii, and so like it's really just like service industry or things like that, and that's not something I want to do. So a lot of my life has just been like, oh, I want to be an animator. I got to move to LA, and I'm gonna leave here. Because yeah, I just think there needs to be more opportunities to other things other than tourism and service industry here.
Yeah, for sure. On that note about animators, we have a question that someone asked if there were, for the two animators, particular challenges or difficulties that you had to overcome once the production moved to online with the pandemic. Screening online or
I think there were challenges, but I think it was didn't affect that much because animation is almost built to be done remotely. Like obviously it's a lot better to be around people or with your crew, but we are seeing kind of like a rise in animation because of the pandemic, just because that's, for a while, I know there's live action films filming now, but for a while like that was kind of all you could do, was if you wanted to make a movie or a show, like it's animation. So I'd say most of the problems were like to do with burnout or just you got to take extra steps to organize just because everything is online. But yeah, it was mostly just having to just let yourself like relax sometimes and just take everything in because it was a lot to process. So that was the main thing.
Kalilinoe, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the pandemic actually helped me finish the film sooner because I was able to work from like 9 a.m. till 2 a.m. You know, with an hour break maybe. But yeah, what Gavin said about burnout, that was especially true because now I didn't have like traveling in between to break up my work sessions. But another thing that happened was that sometimes it was harder to communicate with the crew. And there were some people who fell off of the film and I never heard from them. And it was, I guess it was just difficult to make up for something that wouldn't have happened if we were still in person.
I would think for all of filmmakers and films coming out this year during the pandemic, I think about our festival, while it has been really great to extend our reach, you know, we can reach across North America this year with our festival. But the one thing that really makes me sad is that we're not all gathered together watching these films together. So as filmmakers, you don't get to see the audience react to your film or, you know, get that experience. And at DisOrient, one of the in some ways essential parts of a festival is to talk about the films after all together, so that, you know, because it's the films are so impactful and they just want to be talked about, and the person next to you will take from the film a completely different thing than you did, depending on who you are and what you've brought to your experience. Do you want to speak to that, Anthony, about what's it been like releasing your film in a pandemic?
Yeah, it's that energy, and yeah, you said it well. It's like that you don't get when you're in a space together, and yeah, it's really really sad, and a lot of people, the theater I volunteer at, everyone's missing that. But again, there is that opportunity of everyone watching something at once is cool too, and reaching audiences not just in one local place at a time is something too. So I guess it's pros and cons.
Yeah. So someone asked also, Anthony, you brought up a lot of issues in your film, subject matters. Do you foresee taking one of those and making that into a bigger film? Any parts of your film, some of the issues that you've explored?
Yeah, I think that I did a lot of filming and talked to a lot of people, and there are definitely things that I wasn't able to include that I think about. even just, for example, like looking at the films in Hollywood's history of portraying Hawaii, there's some films I didn't get to talk about that would be interesting as kind of, I guess, essays or ways to interpret. And then also, I had mentioned to you, Susan, before that I was filming about the biotech industry in Hawaii and their kind of long-term, how they formed out of the sugar and pineapple industry. And that's something that I want to make as a separate short, but it touches on all these themes in the film, but it really needed its own film because it's such a long history, very complicated and very fraught and intense and ongoing. So that's something that I want to focus on for sure.
Yeah, we are definitely looking forward to that film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, one of the comments is about your cousin. I don't know if you're comfortable speaking about some of the family members in your film, and especially at the end, it's very poignant that you have dedications to people. Do you want to speak to any of that?
Yeah, my cousin Micah, who you see briefly, him and River fishing. He's not heavily featured, but he's him and River are fishing together, both my cousins. He really tragically, he passed away last year, early in the year, very unexpectedly. And it was, it's, such a shock because, it's just meant to capture a particular moment in his life. And going back to talking about my great uncle Henry, who he who in the film has passed away, but had lived these very particular chapters and these stories, and it felt like he was ready to move on. And it's just, it's just so tragic that Micah's, it's just his story was cut short, and it shouldn't have ended that way, and it was never, it wasn't. It's not a fitting memorial to him the way that I felt it was to Henry, and it's makes it much heavier, and it's very, very hard to watch. But
yeah, very personal for you and your family. Yeah. So I was wondering if you all can speak to the role of filmmakers right now, especially in regard to Hawaii. I mean, I know I spoke about this with Mitchell Viernes, the filmmaker of Water Like Fire, and how Hawaii is doing such a great job, I think, of grooming their young filmmakers, nurturing them to rise up and be the storytellers and passing down the stories of Hawaii, and bringing Hawaii forward in a new way, a modern way. What do you see as your role as filmmakers going forward, especially in the context of Hawaii? Kalilinoe, what do you?
At least for my role, I think my goal is to uplift the younger filmmakers, because I know they have stories to tell, and if this was how I connected with my culture, then maybe this is an avenue for them. But also, I know the future like depends on our present actions, and for me, our present is informed by our past knowledge. So just uplifting this cyclical process of production, because like I believe that the more films that come out that are told from a Kanaka or local perspective means the more chances we get, and we won't feel as pressured to tell the most important story and to get it right on the first try. Concerning the future, I think it's just more important to get the conversation growing and for the discussion to be there than it is to get it right. Yeah, film is just like an opportunity for us to talk with each other.
That's great. Gavin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of just thinking about like my experience coming up as an animator on Oahu versus like having spoken to some other like Asian American artists who made films like maybe at their mainland art school. And like I think Hawaii's film community, like not just animation community, but the film community in general, does a really good job at cultivating like young filmmakers to tell more personal stories rooted in culture and just tell different stories and be comfortable with that. Because I know like some animators on the mainland, they've gotten pushback from like their communities or their schools, like, oh, you can't, like, what is this? You can't talk about that, or it's just, and they, to their credit, they still did, and I think that's really great. But
Mm.
I think, yeah, it's really different here, where like I was almost encouraged to be more open about like the Asian American experience or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's your story, right? That's what you know. So of course, those are the stories that you should be putting forward and putting out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about that, Anthony?
Yeah, like we were talking before, I think I really liked being paired with these films because, I spend time in my documentary talking about just this awful use of film, misuse of film for propaganda for these, and it's a terrible history, and seeing films, from the perspective of Hawaii and creating this whole new language and just kind of leaving that behind. And I like what you said, Kalilinoe, about not having a pressure of saying everything at once, but just creating this space where you can explore all these different ideas, and things could be subtle and light and fun, or you can talk about serious things, but just this whole new landscape of talking from that perspective is really exciting.
Yeah. So we're kind of coming up to an hour now. I kind of wanted to make sure I ask you all what your next projects are now that we're talking about the future. What do you have something going on, or what do you see up next for you? Kalilinoe, how about you?
Yeah, I'm animating for another Indigenous film, also about Mo'olelo, and then some other Mo'olelo for NMG Network. But in school and personally, I've been writing more creative stories that I hope I'll be able to turn later into screenplays for animation. And right now, specifically, that I hope to influence all my future work is I'm doing a lot of research on Hawaii rhetoric and ethical practices in production. So I hope that will inform my methodology and creative work in the future.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Gavin?
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of going the TV animation industry route, because I have been seeing like a lot of really great stories coming up in that industry, particularly because it is faster paced and they can be more progressive. Like I'm seeing a lot of people of color's stories and creatives coming up. So I'm hoping to make my way up that ladder and hopefully tell some stories someday, some of my stories someday. But yeah, right now I am kind of taking a break from my own personal projects and working on other people's, just to build up my skills. So I'm a storyboard artist on an adult animated series called Hell of a Boss, and I'm still working in animated short film too. I'm not the director, but I'm directing the animators for a film called Sina Matinuro, which is telling the story of Sina and the eel from the island of Rotuma. So.
Wow, cool. How about you, Anthony? You mentioned a little bit about.
Oh yeah, I guess that would be the next thing I'm working on. It's called The Experiment Station, based on the experiment stations of looking at earliest experiments of chemicals and pesticides used by the sugar companies as kind of this something that was used early on is, and unfortunately still in the soil in Hawaii if you look at it today.
Yeah, that kind of breaks my heart to even think about that. So before we end, we did have one more question. I think it would be great to hear from you all about it. The question is it very difficult for folks in Hawaii to always be extending a warm aloha to outsiders who take away from the traditional spirit of the place? I guess I'll also add to that, we didn't talk about it, but one of the cringiest parts of your film, Anthony, was seeing the social media posts put out about from the tourists. So anyway, but the question is it hard to see outsiders taking away from the spirit of Hawaii? Anyone? Gavin, how about you?
Yeah, I can only speak to this as an Asian American. I think it can even extend that sentiment to like non-native locals. Like it is upsetting when people kind of just come in and treat this land as their own when it's not. Yeah, that I've seen a lot of videos like that, but that video you shown in Cane Fire, that was, I hated it. I hated it so much. But, yeah,
you want the lizards to come out and swallow the
yeah, I kind of do have a cynical view of it, but yeah, I just really don't enjoy it, and it feels terrible seeing it happen. And I thought it was still really powerful at the end of Cane Fire to still see like a family open up and be like, you're still welcome here, like even through like past trauma. I'd say like there's a level of grace that like you can only get here, I think.
Yeah.
Grace,
yeah. Kalilinoe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's never hard to put aloha at the forefront when meeting people. But aloha isn't the only thing we're going to show people because we're also invested in teaching and growing understanding. So I don't know, it is hard to counter any entitlement when people think that the only thing they want to extract from us is aloha, or they think they're entitled to aloha, but it's not something you can just take. Yeah.
Anthony?
Yeah, it's hard to watch. My family experienced it, and like Gavin was saying, that video that I feature is, my producer and I, we probably would check YouTube at least once a week of videos that are coming through, and that one video isn't like a moment of bad behavior or kind of this, it's so indicative of what's coming in this entitlement it's coming through on YouTube that someone would feel comfortable to express themselves in that way and publicly share it. But that video just happened to be the most of the tip of the iceberg, I guess. And so it's obviously something that people feel comfortable enough, and it really needs to be questioned why that is. What is, are they being pushed or challenged or made uncomfortable, that there has to be a mutual respect? It's something worth interrogating.
I think it also kind of speaks to just land and culture acknowledgement in general, not just Hawaii. All throughout our festival, every program, we've been doing a land acknowledgement for Eugene. And I have done some of them. And I will say that every time I say it, I mean, even now to talk about it, it feels very like essential, like very necessary that we take a moment always to consider that we're all just visitors here on the land, wherever we are, and that there were many people, many living things, way before us and will continue way after us, and to just kind of have that gratitude and respect generally for our place in this world and how we treat each other,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have any last comments that you want to say, or it's been great having you. Yeah.
I guess I just want to, because we were talking about people taking care of each other during the pandemic, and I just want to give a shout out to Corona Care Hawaii, which is based in Oahu, a mutual aid network. It's a really great just network to donate to.
Great. Yeah. Kalilinoe or Gavin, do you have any last things you want to put out there?
I guess kind of in that same vein, yeah, for anyone watching, just I guess just I don't have anything specific, but just to spread more awareness for like the Asian hate crimes that's been happening, and like I can't think of any off the top of my head, but find a place where you can donate, or just in general speak out and try to get more awareness towards what's happening. Pretty much, well, before this year, but it's been on the rise during the pandemic. So
yeah, thanks. Kalilinoe.
I guess last thing I want to say is, I know whoever's watching, anyone, we all have a story that we need to get out. And you don't need a camera or anything to get it out there. It could be just your voice, and guarantee someone somewhere is going to find that, think of it as a treasure, and will want to put it out there. So just send your words out. You can use art, animation. Yeah, there's a lot of accessible media now, so you should tell your stories.
Great. That's a great way to end. Yeah, let's raise our voices and tell our stories. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us and coming to our audience. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.